she won't miss it. Okay. It's good to see everyone. That would be Laura and Brent, Scott, and Donna, and Tom, and me, and Andrew. Okay, cool. Public comment? If you wish to address the board under public comment, please prepare for the time limit of 3 minutes per speaker. We expect comments to be civil, disrespectful or disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. The board is not authorized under the Colorado Open Meetings Law to discuss, comment, or take action at this meeting on any issue raised by public comment that is not part of tonight's agenda. Kim, would you like to speak? Thank you. Also, Amanda's here. And Amanda, there's cookies and then there's blueberry lemon. Yes. Hannah's the cookie. Are you good?
Yeah. So I'm Pam Chadbourne. I live a block or so from here, and a few comments about the greenhouse gas inventory stuff. I've said before, I'd like to actually break up. I'm afraid that the concept of evaluating greenhouse gas will cause decision makers to drag their feet for the whole package. And I want to break up the package so that they are motivated to do some easy, I hate to say low hanging fruit, but first we need that. So I'm going to say yes, 100% energy efficient streetlights, but I'd like to describe it as we turn our code to requiring being based on the model lighting ordinance in zoning code. And we had that for 10 years, from 2000 to 2010. When you see good lighting around here, that's due to we had it. It was repealed not for any good reason, but because our city manager left, and then we had no community development director, and an activist libertarian mayor said to staff, poor staff can't argue with the mayor, get rid of that lighting, and it only passed by 4-3. There was no good reason to get rid of that. There's every reason to bring it back. Let's get model lighting ordinance based code. And the point is that a couple of societies got together, the Dark Sky Association and the International Illumination Engineering guys got together and set up the model for us. So we don't have to think about every little detail. We just have to adapt it to our city, and we've already had that before. So let's go 100% from model lighting ordinance into our zoning code. We're also in a building boom. Our council people can't resist giving developers too many incentives to build a whole bunch of stuff. The least they could do is supply well-lit housing, which means the lighting is restricted to the area where on the property where it's needed. And it doesn't intrude, it doesn't trespass into someone else's property. And the genius is if you illuminate the structure you're trying to protect, anybody in between the observer who you want, and that light is silhouetted. They cannot hide. Whereas if you have glare from that going into your eyes, you're not going to see many intruders. And they can hide in bushes and stuff in shadow and get to the target. So anyway, we need model lighting ordinance now. Don't wait. Just tell them to do it. And don't just say energy efficient streetlights. Do the model lighting ordinance. It's in the built environment, by the way. So just put it in terms of what the city can do. We need a life inventory besides trees and stuff like that. Yes, reduce use of pesticides and herbicides. It's limited by the state, but let's get rid of as many of those as we can. And I would add contracted collectors of solid waste and recycling. Do that now. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for tolerating my
It's always a
desire for this.
It's always a pleasure. Okay, let's get into our first agenda item, the climate modeling and greenhouse gas goals.
Wonderful. So I'm gonna stop my screen. And Sarah, can you still hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna pass it over to you.
All right, perfect. Let me get my screen share going. All right, just want to make sure you all can see my screen.
Yes.
Perfect. All right, well, let's get started. So thank you all. My name is Sarah Burke, and I am with ICLEI USA. And we were contracted to do the climate modeling and greenhouse gas goals for Littleton, Colorado. I am based in Southeast Florida, so it is a late night for me, but I'm happy to be here with you guys to go over what we modeled and then seek recommendations from you all on what we might want to change in our modeling. And if I can get my screen to skip. All right, so for the agenda today, I'm going to give you a little bit of a background on who ICLEI USA is for those of you who are not aware of our organization, why this project is important. Very briefly, I just want to recap what your greenhouse gas inventory results were, because that is what we were modeling against to see what your future projections were going to be. Then I'm going to talk about a little bit about the methodology that was used in the modeling, as well as some of the assumptions that we used. And then we'll get into the details. So what your overall emission reductions will be based off our modeling that we did. And then go by sector. So looking at the built environment, looking at transportation, waste, and nature-based solutions. I will touch on a little bit about the co-benefits that you do gain from doing these actions. So not only greenhouse gas emission reduction, but also quality of life, economic benefits of doing this, and so forth. And then finally, the next steps that are part of this project, as well as seeking your feedback. So that way we can make sure that we are presenting something to commission that you all support. So ICLEI USA, for those of you who do not know who we are a 501c3 membership-based organization, and we lead a network of local governments and are dedicated to community climate action, sustainability, resilience, nature-based solutions, equity, and the circular economy. Our members span the entire United States, and they include U.S. cities and towns of all sizes, counties. We also have regional planning associations and governments, as well as tribal nations that are all members of our organization. In the state of Colorado alone, we have about 35 members currently. So why is it important? So why is climate planning important? Why is this work? Why were we contracted to assist? And the overall reason is that by doing this planning, it helps the city understand its emissions. It helps the city set its priorities and take effective climate action. So first and foremost, it helps establish a baseline, which you guys have already done with your 2023 baseline. But your inventory provides insights on where your emissions are actually coming from. So that's critical to have this baseline so you understand the impacts that you're having, and you can also then measure over time the progress to make sure you're either reducing or staying on trend with your emissions. Another benefit of this project is it helps you set clear and achievable goals and targets. So based off your inventory, we can then establish realistic reduction targets that align with any local, state, or national objectives there are. And without having that baseline and without having this data and this modeling, targets become speculative. You're guessing at how much you can actually reduce on greenhouse gas emissions instead of actually physically having the data and the math behind it to justify it. It also helps you prioritize. What are your most effective actions? So modeling climate actions enables cities to evaluate various strategies, such as building efficiency, adding more renewable energy, modifying your transportation system. There's a whole number of things you can do. But by modeling, you can identify which of those actions are going to have the highest impact to reduce your emissions based off your baseline inventory, in hopes to also lower cost on those implementations and have the greatest co-benefits. In addition, doing climate planning helps you track your progress and hold you accountable. So doing regular inventories helps facilitate tracking You can make adjustments, but you're also being transparent to your residents, your funders, and your partners. So you're making this publicly available. This is what our emissions are. These are the actions that we're doing. This is the reduction we're having, and you're making that visible for all to see. It also does help support better policy and investment decisions because, your inventory is going to show where you are in your emissions, and you can direct what needs to happen first to get the biggest impact and the biggest reduction. And, this can be used on when the city is looking at investing in infrastructure projects. It can be used in zoning and land use policies. What policies do you need to put into place to drive emissions down? And a lot of times this is needed for a lot of grants and funding applications out there. They want to know that you are tracking your greenhouse gas emissions and having an actual plan to reduce those. It also does help improve your community resilience and equity. By doing this, we mentioned that I'm going to talk about co-benefits. But on top of greenhouse gas emissions, you're going to have improved air quality. You're going to be mitigating energy burdens. And most of the time, those communities that are most impacted by poor air quality and energy burdens are those that are from disadvantaged or vulnerable communities. So you're being equitable with all of the residents throughout the city. And then finally, it does help with meeting any reporting or funding requirements. So a lot of states have certain requirements that need to be met when it comes to greenhouse gases, inventories, and modeling. Sometimes the federal government will require those things. And even at the county level, your county may at some point require certain climate actions being done. So having a plan in place and knowing what you're going to try to achieve will help support any reporting that you have, but also help with grant funding. So a little bit about your 2023 greenhouse gas inventory, because I know this has been presented on before, so I won't touch on it very much, but just want to refresh your mind, because like I said, this is where all the modeling stemmed from. So this is your baseline that we were looking at. So your stationary energy for the city of Littleton, town of Littleton, is your largest emitting sector, accounting for about 62% of your emissions, followed behind by transportation at 32% and waste at 6%. So a little bit about our modeling. So first I want to talk to you about the platform that we use to model emission reductions. So our platform is called ClearPath 2.0, and it was launched early 2025, so just last year. We had a previous platform called ClearPath 1.0 that local governments had been using for years, and this is a brand new tool that we are now providing. And what this platform does is it streamlines the entire climate action process through smarter data, dynamic modeling, cross-departmental collaboration can be done in this platform, and it helps local governments turn climate plans into measurable actions. So instead of just planning, it's also supposed to help show you and help you track your actual progress. It takes a different approach to modeling, one that allows us to incorporate the dynamic changes that are occurring at the local government level. So we have a couple things that are kind of different with the way our modeling is than you might have seen from past plans and stuff. And I won't go into too much detail on this, but we use what's known as transition elements. And you can kind of think of a transition element as, in other plans, you might see these as strategies. So what strategy are you going to implement to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions? So transition element framework is based off of the International Panel for Climate Change data. And it kind of takes all that very hard science and dense math and physics, and it turns it into these building blocks that then can be used to model transitioning from a high to a low or no emission activity. So think of this as shifting from an internal combustion engine vehicle to an electric vehicle, or shifting from landfilling waste to composting. So landfilling waste has a higher greenhouse gas emissions than composting does. So basically what we're doing is we are modeling how emissions would be reduced if a percentage of the community shifted to something. So a percent shifted to EV cars or a percent shifted to composting and so forth. That is kind of seen in this red box right here. The activity shift is what we call them. However, what we don't model is the actual policies or programs that you're implementing to actually drive that shift. So think of it, we'll use EV for example. What we're modeling is the physical shift of the vehicle changing. So changing from a gas internal combustion engine car to an electric car. We're not going to be modeling this. Platform does not model the number of EV charging stations that you're installing. We're not modeling a policy that you're putting into place. And the reason why is there's so many different variables that come into play when you're looking at that scale. How many hours are people charging? What's the cost that you're having the charging stations? How many charging stations are in the town? And so it's very difficult to make sure that you're modeling something that is realistic and that you can physically measure over time. But we can measure the physical change over on the cars. So that is what we're doing. Now, those actions, which are here in the blue, which we call interventions, are still very, very important in climate planning. In the platform that we have, you still track all of your actions that you're doing. And what it does help you do is if you're seeing that you're behind on your progress on one of your actions, that means you have to implement more policies or programs to drive that change. And vice versa, if you're seeing a reduction happening, then you know the things that you have in place are working. So how did we actually start modeling? So we're going to talk about the methodology that was used. So we identified which actions we were going to model based off two criteria. One, it had to be a high impact action, or it had to be a community priority. So a high impact action is those that have the highest impact on reducing emissions due to either the scale or the intensity to decrease those emissions. Those typically target the largest sectors. So think electricity, heating, transportation. These were determined based off ICLA USA's staff knowledge and our research on best practices. And examples of those are shifting to heat pumps, shifting to walking and cycling, and so forth. The other criteria that we use is it identified as a community priority. So this was determined by a deep analysis of about 10 different documents that was provided by your staff that was reviewed, including the Environmental Stewardship Action Plan. We analyzed and synthesized all the biggest needs and wants that were identified in your plans, and then we made sure we incorporated those into modeling. At the end, all transition elements that we modeled, all the strategies that we modeled, were either high impact and identified as community priority, which was most common. Almost everything we modeled was identified in a plan. And only about one, I would say, was classified as a community priority, but it wasn't high impact, and that was composting. So composting, waste in general, doesn't have too large of an emissions reduction as some of the other sectors do. So we still did that one because we knew that was still a community priority to have, and that's the reason why it was included. Some other assumptions that we made. So overall, when possible, we modeled based off established goals or targets already adopted by the city, such as those goals and targets being identified in the Transportation Master Plan, the South Metro Waste Diversion Plan, and the Urban Forestry Management Plan. So those plans all had established targets, and so those were what we were using for this modeling. Secondly, Xcel Energy has announced or has published that they want to be net zero by 2050. So we're using that assumption. Our modeling is saying the utility is saying that they want to be net zero by 2050, that's what we're going to model to. Will they reach that? Will they not? That's up in the air, but that's a commitment that we have seen, and that's the reason why we modeled. Some strategies that weren't included, because sometimes people wonder why, when they see what was selected, why certain things were not there. So one we did not model was recycling. And the reason why is most of the significant emission reductions that you're going to see when it comes to recycling are at the manufacturing scale, not at the residential, commercial, curbside recycling. And so between composting and recycling, composting has the bigger emission reduction. That's the reason why we chose that one to do. It's still important to consider, even though it's not a high impact action, it's still something that needs to be considered when you're doing climate action planning. And I know there's a lot of work already happening within the city on the side of waste. So we knew we were safe to keep that one off of this analysis. And then the other one is water conservation. So we did not model anything around water conservation, and kind of the same thing. Your biggest emission reductions for water conservation actually are felt at the water plants. So the water treatment plant and the wastewater plants. You're not processing as much water. That all is felt in the energy side of things. So if there's a reduction in energy at those plants, you can tie that to water conservation. In-home business water conservation, you're really not going to see a dramatic decrease in the emissions. Once again, though, I am going to hit, it's still a very, very important topic that needs to be included in any sustainability action plan or a large holistic plan. But when you're just looking at greenhouse gas emissions and climate planning, these two just do not rise as high as some other actions. So now to the good stuff. So what did we actually end up modeling? So this is a snapshot of the dashboard that is available on the platform that we used. And I will start by saying the modeling run that we did was using the most aggressive targets that we could set in the building sector. In the areas of transportation, waste, and nature-based solutions, those were already kind of pre-established goals already adopted by the city. So we don't really have too much wiggle room on those, but there is some wiggle room on the built environment side of things. What you're seeing here is both your business as usual forecast. So if you do nothing, what are your emissions going to look like by 2050, as well as everything that we modeled, what is your projected reductions. So if you look here at the top where this red arrow is, this is your business as usual scenario, that by 2050, if you do nothing, you don't implement any actions, don't do anything to try to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions, our calculations estimate that you'll have about 637,000 metric tons of emissions by 2050. This pink arrow is your baseline, which is sitting at about 462. So that's about a 38% increase in your emissions over that time period. And just to let you know how we calculate this, this is all just based off estimated population growth. So your inventory from 2023, how is that going to grow as your population grows over time? We don't do any other variables in that growth. It's only based off population. So the bottom arrow, this blue arrow that you see here, this is if you follow everything that we've modeled tonight and achieved all your actions, you would achieve a 79% reduction by 2050 from your business as usual. So this is your overall reduction. So you still have about 21% of your emissions that are not accounted for in this modeling. And a couple things for that, reasons why. One, we were limited to how many things we could model in this project. So there are still areas that we could address in the inventory to get you closer to net zero if that was the goal. And then also there are just some things that are beyond your control that are impacting your inventory. So that's the reason why there is still that gap. The white arrow that you see here is highlighting this light gray. This is what we're calling that pathway gap. So that 21% gap that you have that will still need to be addressed by actions in the future. And some of the things too, just to keep in mind, because we only modeled off of what in the transportation, waste, and nature-based solutions category were adopted targets already, doesn't mean that those targets can't change. Could be more aggressive on how many trees that you actually want to have planted by 2050. For the modeling, though, we based it off of what was already adopted. So you'll see here your biggest reductions come in this golden yellowish color, and that's your energy mix. So that's the clean grid and renewable energy. That's followed closely, almost like very close to each other in the built-in transportation categories. And the reason why you might be questioning why the built environment is not as large as you probably think based off your total inventory, it is because this built environment is only taking into consideration electrification and efficiency. Anything about the clean grid is going to be showing up in this wedge here. So that's why it's not as large as you probably think. Another way to look at it is this is the percentage. So as you can see here, we're going to sum up the energy mix and the built environment because they're pretty much together. And that equates to about 68% of the reductions that we calculated. Then it's followed by transportation, and then you have your waste and nature-based solutions, which falls very much in line with what your inventory is. Your biggest sector is your stationary energy, and so our biggest reductions are going to be in that stationary energy sector, followed by transportation. And I went the wrong way. Let's try that again. So each sector, I'm going to kind of go through these some. So in the built environment and energy mix, so I'm going to bring these two together. So this is not only going to be about the actual buildings, but the clean grid and renewable energy. What we modeled was for single family, multifamily, commercial, and public buildings. So we had 4 different sectors we were modeling for. For all of them, for heat pumps, we modeled to shifting 100% of the square feet to heat pumps. For retrofitting for heating and cooling, we also modeled 100% of all square feet in all those sectors would be retrofitted for heating and cooling by 2050. Energy efficient street lighting, we modeled to having 100% of all street lights being energy efficient. And then for electricity from solar rooftops, this was based off of your rooftop potential that you have in the town, and then took some reductions off of your overall potential by based off of age of roof, the actual energy production of solar panels to get to this number. So this is actual a pretty solid number of what is actually achievable by 2050 for rooftop solar. And then of course, energy mix based off of Excel Energy, we modeled to net zero. So in that sector alone, we've modeled just over 370,000 metric tons reduced in 2025. So this is not cumulative, this is a 1-year reduction if all of these were in place. And just to note again, the ones that you see here in asterisks, these are the ones that were modeled as aggressively as we could, which is why we modeled them all the way to 100%. And the reason why is because there are no plans, no adopted targets for your built environment. So we had some leeway on what we could model. And this is what we're going to seek your recommendation on is, should these be the percentages we shoot for, or should we model to something different? The next category, transportation. So these were all based kind of off of the Transportation Master Plan that has been adopted already and is being updated as we speak. And most of these are straightforward. Walking and biking, electrifying cars, remote work, and so forth. The only ones I really want to talk about are these bottom 2 here, the improved car technology. So these would be as we implement new cafe standards. This is where this is kind of trying to capture. So you're improving your car engine technology. You're not shifting away from an internal combustion car. And these are kind of national standard percentages. The other one is improved urban planning. So what that one is, think of this as any strategies the city might implement that are around transit-oriented development, or anything that would reduce the need for single occupancy vehicles. So dense construction, more walkable construction, complete street projects, those kind of things. That's what falls into this improved urban planning. And with those reductions, we're estimating about just right over 150,000 metric tons of a reduction. In waste, like I said, we only identified one to measure, and that was for composting. And we set a target of 15%, which is based on the plan that has already been established and adopted, and then extrapolated up to 2050. So I think the plan actually has about like 7% by 2030 or 2035. And so we just extrapolated up to what that percent would look like in 2050 if you kept consistent. This one, your waste reduction emissions by 2050 or in 2050 would be just over 4,500 metric tons. And then finally, nature-based solutions. So this one, we only selected one, and this is to maintain and expand your tree canopy. And this one is 100% pulled from the Urban Forestry Master Plan, which calls for 30% tree canopy by 2050. The plan also states that it wants 50% coverage by 2090. So with this, by increasing the tree canopy to meet that 30% target, you would have about a reduction similar to the waste of just over 4,500 metric tons. Keep in mind, this one is only for new trees added. This is the reduction you have. Any of the trees that you currently have that's already in your inventory and is being modeled as maintaining those trees in there. So that's part of the reduction as well. It's just not captured in this transition element. So I mentioned co-benefits. I've talked a lot about all these gases that are being emitted, but there's other co-benefits by doing greenhouse gas emission reduction and climate planning. So climate change is already impacting Colorado, just like it's impacting all of us around the US, and it's also having an impact in Littleton. If you do meet all these goals laid out in the roadmap, you'll be able to better address the impacts that you have. For example, these are just some highlights. By implementing all this stuff, you'll improve your air quality as well as reduce your ozone exposure. So you know, as most likely everyone in Colorado knows, that you sit in the Front Range air shed, where ground level ozone is a major health issue. There's actually a CU Anschutz report that notes that violations of the EPA air quality standards in 2024 was exceeded 40 days that there was violations to the EPA air quality standard. And a lot of that was caused by the wildfire smoke, of course, but also ozone. And both of those pose risks to respiratory and cardiac vascular risks. So by reducing the burning of fossil fuels, you reduce air pollution, which will improve air quality and can contribute to less health risk and hospitalization rates. And then more generally, on just the health and equity side of things, the Colorado Department of Health Care Policy and Finance, which administers Medicaid, has stated that Medicaid makes up about 1/3 of the total general fund appropriations for the next fiscal year for the state of Colorado. And that is the fastest growing part of the budget. And this was actually just recently presented to the Joint Budget Committee. Historically, health and environmental risks associated with burning of fossil fuels disproportionately impacts underrepresented groups. So by reducing your emissions and thus reducing air pollution, it can lead to healthier communities and reduce hospital rates. And then finally, I want to hit on economics, because a lot of people always, want to know that is there an economic benefit to doing these actions? And there is. So Colorado's climate workforce has a report that they are projecting the demand of additional skilled trades by 2035. And some of those, they are calling for probably about another 3,000 additional electricians that will be needed, as well as about 1,500 construction workers, all in the green sector. So dealing with, you know, all the new electrification that is happening and all the new buildings that are happening. But the green climate workforce for Colorado, that is what they're projecting for 2035. So that's not too far down the road. So think about, by 2050, what would the job market look like? So before we get on to the recommendations, did want to just kind of highlight what some of your peer cities are actually doing in the realm of climate planning and that. So the 4 categories that I have here: greenhouse gas reduction goal, renewable goal, transportation goal, waste goal. What we have modeled, you would have a goal for each one of these categories. And as you can tell from your peers, none of your other peers actually have a plan that has an established goal in all 4 of those categories. I mean, across the board, if we look here just at greenhouse gas reduction, you'll see that most actually are trying to hit net zero by 2050. We do have here Arvada, which is probably the closest to your peer. They have a 70% reduction by 2050. That is their established target. And they're also using the same baseline year, so from 2023. So that's very close to what we've modeled. We modeled 79%. And then you'll also see here that, some don't have any other goals. I will just add a caveat here with Fort Collins. They are probably the most aggressive jurisdiction that you have in the state on what they're actually trying to achieve, especially with some of their, they've called for being zero waste by 2030, which that's in 4 years. But that office has been around for quite some time. They have a very large staff. And so it's not shocking that you'd see them have a little bit more aggressive, because they have been trying to do this work for a lot longer. And so finally, to talk about the recommendations that we're seeking from you. So as I mentioned, in the transportation, waste, and nature-based solutions area, we're probably not going to adjust that modeling at all, just because those are established targets. But in the built environment, we have some wiggle room. So you'll see here that, we can model to the most aggressive, which is what I presented on today, which gives you that 79% reduction. We could do a more moderately aggressive. So these are still pretty aggressive, but backing it down a little bit on all the categories. And that will give us roughly about a 74% reduction. The least aggressive is basically doing the minimum that the city could do by still primarily relying more on the market to drive things than them actively really trying to drive emission reduction. So if we model to the least aggressive changes, that would give about a 69% reduction. Now, you might wonder, well, between these extremes, why is it such a small amount of reduction? And keep in mind, we are still going to model that you have a clean grid by 2050. So we're relying on the utility to drive most of your reductions. And so that's why you don't see all that. So this is what we're going to be seeking your input on, and we can mix them. So if you want to be more aggressive, say on the commercial side of things, but less aggressive on the public building side of things, we can do that. I have no issues on modeling various different scenarios in this. And I will caveat before I hand it back over to Laura, if she wants to add more and start getting feedback from you all, is the plan is to take this to City Commission for adoption. And so that is what we're going to be seeking is what would you want to be put in front of commission for adoption? And with that, I'll hand it over to Laura for any additional comments.
I wanted to seek y'all's input and recommendation for what we would bring to council in terms of how aggressive we want to be in the built environment, because that's the one that has the most wiggle room. And after seeing, there are different ways that different cities and municipalities look at this. Like if we want to drive as hard as we can, knowing we may or may not meet the goals, is that what's actually going to change behavior? Will it change behavior that will actually meet the goals? At the end of the day, it's what are we actually doing to get there? And maybe it is less about what we meet, but I want to set up the community and city for success. It's hard to tell you what I will be doing in 2050, but it will unlikely be me in 25 years. So we are setting this up for a future department and division, and maybe some of you will still be here too, or what you think the community will look like. So there's a lot of unknowns. What will council look like then? We don't know. So we're just gonna make our best guess on what we think makes the most sense and then just drive the most action we can, is my thought. And so I wanted to see what you thought based on what you know of your community and current council and where it has gone. We've changed a lot, I think, in the past decade as a community too. So keeping in mind that things change all the time, but this is something that could be adopted in writing, and you'll have an opportunity to provide, your recommendation to council.
I have a few questions before I give recommendations. So I'll just ask these few and then wait for people to ask others. What's the difference between the residential heat pumps and the residential retrofits for heat and cooling? Same thing for commercial heat pumps and the retrofit.
Yeah, so the heat pumps would be transitioning from a heating source that is natural gas, oil, any of the fossil fuels, and switching to a heat pump, an electric heat pump. So that's a physical shift from fossil fuel to electricity. The retrofits, think more of like insulating your home, more airtight windows. So you're making everything more energy efficient in the home. So you're retrofitting the home. So you're not really changing the furnace. You're actually retrofitting the current, say you have a natural gas furnace. You're putting a retrofit onto that natural gas furnace so it is more efficient, thus reducing the burning of that fossil fuel. You're not getting away from that fossil fuel.
Can I ask the question differently? So by 2050, every house, every commercial building is going to have a heat pump?
Yes. So the way that it would be every house, it'd be all square footage is heated and cooled by a heat pump. But then also on top of that, all square footage would be retrofitted for heating and cooling. So they'd have, more insulation installed. They would have more, their envelope would be sealed better so that you wouldn't have to use as much electricity to heat and cool the same space.
Okay.
Is that feasible? Can a large building be heated with a heat pump?
Yes, absolutely. Now, a lot of those times you have multiple heat pumps. It's not just one single heat pump that is operating a massive building. You have multiples underway. But yes, there are commercial grade and even industrial grade heat pumps.
And does this assume there are no heat pumps currently, and then the savings, converting whole buildings?
So that I would have to look into. I don't remember if you have heat pumps in your baseline inventory or not, Laura. But what it basically is saying is there's a lot of background calculations that are estimating it. So it's taking it off of how many square feet currently are not on heat pumps, and it's shifting that square footage. So it's not going to be looking at the entire square footage of the city. It's just based off your inventory, the square feet that are currently heated by natural gas, it'd be shifting 100% of those square feet.
I guess the way that I would have calculated that would have been by the breakdown of an Excel energy bill if it had natural gas on it. you would be able to see that. But also, I know for a fact that none of our public buildings have heat pumps. I can definitely say that. I don't know, I could pull the numbers from our, like, our permit applications for commercial and residential. But I can only say for certainty that I know that the public buildings, we don't have any heat pumps.
I know that, you know, she said at the outset that we are not considering policy. And I assume that also means incentives, grants, and tax, you know, credits and things like that. But the reality is that if we set that goal of the most aggressive, we have to have an equally aggressive, you know, policy, credit incentive, grant, because, you know, you're dealing with a massive range of income dispersion here where people can't throw money at it to do it. So can you set something that survives, you know, 25 years into the future? If this is a 2050, you know, plan. What do those means?
I had a related question, and Sarah, I don't know if you can answer this, or Laura, if you can answer this. Along with the modeling comes an estimate of the capital investments that are going to be required to hit, you know, 100 or 80 or 60% of targets. Because, you know, I'm just as a homeowner, right? I could tell you how much money I spent on solar panels and additional, you know, sealing my attic and adding insulation, and on my heat pump, and on high efficiency furnaces and all the rest of it. And there's, I mean, unless you have some massive sort of capital investment, I mean, really it'd have to be a huge federal donation to us and cities like us. There's just no way that so many residents of our community, so many institutions in our community are going to come anywhere near some of these goals. And so I'm wondering what ICLEI's thoughts are on where the capital comes from.
Yeah, so interesting that you offer that. So that's this year our main focus is on public-private partnerships and educating municipalities of our members on how to establish those public-private partnerships, because we know that these projects are not cheap and trying to do this. Now, part of our platform, and one thing that we did not do in this project, is we have a whole economic side of our platform, which then looks at your targets and says, this is the actual cost that it's going to cost you to do this, but then also looks at the benefits. So it's looking at your ROI so that you can say, yes, the upfront capital cost is going to be this, but this is how much money we're going to save over the years. And it then becomes, something that's investable. Now, that was not part of this project, which is why we don't have that for this. But that is something that we are constantly looking at, is how do you support municipalities being able to either create those incentive programs or even doing it on their own buildings. And there's a number of different ways and avenues to do this. There's green banks that are now coming up that are giving low or no interest loans to residents and businesses. I would say almost every state has a green bank now that's doing that. And if they don't, they're about ready to have one. And then, we don't know what the future has in store for us. So, we're making estimations of here's what your actions are going to be. We don't know what the market's going to be in the future, really. Is there going to be a bigger drive? Are there going to be future federal programs that are going to be assisting with this? Are there going to be certain things? So it is kind of making a gamble of saying like, you know, we're going to try to shoot for this, and we're going to try to put all of our effort behind here. We don't know if we're going to achieve it, but that's the target we're going to shoot for. And I will say our municipalities, our members are all over the board on their level of action that they want to commit to. So we have some extremely aggressive. I've talked to Laura about this several times. Travis County, Texas was another one that we did a modeling for. They wanted net zero. So we modeled them to 98% reduction. And that was what was submitted to their commission and adopted. And that's home of Austin, Texas. So they were extremely aggressive. I'm here in South Florida, not aggressive. They want to be as, you know, conservative in their planning as possible. And so it really is up to what you feel your jurisdiction would be comfortable enough saying, we're willing to at least say we're going to attempt. Because even if the plans you have, you know, the urban tree master plan of a 30% increase in your tree canopy by 2050. That doesn't seem like a lot, but trees are not cheap. And that plan itself, you know, where is the funding going to come to plant these trees that the urban tree plan has? So that's, I know it was a long-winded answer. Hopefully it answers some of it.
I mean, a couple questions come up for me immediately. I mean, when I think of places like Boulder, Colorado and Austin, Texas, and places that are aggressive in their emissions reduction goals, I don't, for good reasons, think immediately of equitable communities. And what I do think of, also with good reason, is, you know, overwhelmingly white reserves of affluence. And there was even some comment at a prior meeting of ours about, in the aftermath of the Marshall Fire, what some of the infrastructure rebuild was looking like. And it was straining the grid, because it was a lot of like 6,000 square foot homes that wanted to be all electric. And what does that mean for, you know, vulnerable and marginalized communities? I don't know. Another question that comes up for me is, we had a prior board member who had a sort of subject matter expertise in electrification. And one of the items of sort of low hanging fruit that he would talk about was electrifying landscaping machinery. Everything from lawnmowers and trimmers to, you know, whatever the city uses in its landscaping efforts. I'm just wondering if that's any part of ICLEI's modeling, and if not, why not?
So, okay, try to answer both. So on the equity side of things, yes, completely understand that there can always be a skew on that. It's, you know, it's the affluent communities that can do this. And what we try to encourage at our organization is that equity has to be considered at the very beginning and at the very forefront of any planning that you're doing. And it has to be an active, conscious decision to always be considering it, and not just on an income equity level, but all equity, elderly, sex, gender, making sure that all of those considerations are being done in that planning. Now, there's only so much our organization can do. We're providing you with a model to show you what you can. We provide you with the best practices that we're seeing. And then, you know, it's up to the actual jurisdiction to take hold and say yes. And it's up to the residents and the businesses to say, yes, this is what we want our jurisdictions to do. Now, I will say, outside of Austin, just going back to that Travis County, the rest of their counties, they were like, you know, Austin is way ahead of the rest of us. And, you know, but they wanted to challenge their commission to say, this is what we're going to present to you. And if you're not comfortable with it, we can totally reduce it. But they didn't, they wanted to try to shoot for the moon and see how close they could get. And I think they were even surprised that their commission 100% was like, yeah, let's go for it. This is the only way that we will have the energy behind us and the argument to say, well, now we have to invest this capital because we have this plan that we've said we want to achieve, and we need to actually put money behind that activity. And then on the second one, on lawn equipment. Now, yes, we can model lawn equipment electrifying it. We did not in this project because we were limited to the amount that we could model.
Sarah, I'm gonna add something there.
Yeah.
There's like very strict regulations at the state level for that. So for lawn and gardening equipment. So municipalities have had to transition like beyond like a certain I think it's like 10 horsepower. And then for some of the larger pieces, some of them do not have electric options and some do, but again, that also becomes an investment that our leadership and council has to decide if they want to make with it. Is that the best, or is it better to do a heat pump in a new building? Like that's part of this conversation, but I will say that municipalities were required. So we do have it below that level, and then they did incentives for residents, sort of in that same vein. They also had companies switch as well. So the lawn and garden equipment is something that the state has continually tried to take on. Now, I don't know how much they can provide for that, like that larger equipment. It's like, how much of that do they have as electric or not electric? How many hours can that run when it's like becomes bigger is like the same thing with like a snowplow. And like, it's just like some of the technology's there and some isn't, and not that it's not a good opportunity, but also it's hard to know, and that's kind of what this is. It's like figuring out those pieces. But I just wanted, before you got too deep, Sarah, to provide that context about Colorado specifically, just for this one niche.
Yeah, I will just add that our modeling, we can model up to, I think we have about 400 different actions that we can model, shifts that we can model. The project limited us to a certain number, so we went after the most high impact, and that's the reason why that did not make it up there. Now, I will say, I have experience from where I live. We were also looking at landscaping equipment because that was actually the biggest air pollutant outside of greenhouse gases that we experienced in the county that I live in. We have so many golf courses, and the lawn equipment for those golf courses, and there's also the health impact of people who are operating those machines, breathing those fumes in as they're working. So it's kind of twofold. So it's a very important action to do. And I will say, even with this plan, like this plan is only modeling certain things, doesn't mean that other things cannot be done to also reduce your emissions. These were just modeling the ones that would get you the biggest impact.
Can I ask one other question, Sarah?
Yeah.
I honestly don't know how kind of outmoded this question and this thinking might be, but I just want to ask it. Does the model account for carbon debts in any way? And what I mean is electric vehicles have to be manufactured, and that involves carbon emissions. Heat pumps have to be manufactured, and that involves carbon emissions. Insulation has to be manufactured, and that involves carbon emissions, and so on. So the inputs aren't carbon pure, as it were. I don't know if it's enough of a carbon debt that it affects the numbers that I'm seeing in front of me or not.
So currently our platform does not take into account upstream emissions. So the emissions tied with the actual manufacturing. This is direct emissions from the use of said item. Now that is in the works. Our platform developers, they also work in Europe predominantly. And that platform actually does have the upstream. And so they're trying to bring that portion of the platform into our US platform. We do have it in some, and that is more on the renewable side. So like we have upstream emissions that can be included for the manufacturing of solar panels, wind turbines, of those. But overall, our US greenhouse gas inventory protocol that has been adopted across the United States for all local government emissions, that's never made it into our actual standard protocol. It's, if you want to, we will provide assistance on how you can do that. And we have different ways to help those municipalities that want to measure some of that. But it's not common practice. But once we have that added feature into the platform in the future, then yes, you would be able to actually manage that. Because you also have to think what we don't have is the emissions from the current production. So you would have to think about what are the emissions associated with creating a natural gas furnace, take all those into account, plus the shifting of those. So it's really complicated to get all of that into the platform. So that's why it hasn't been there yet, but they are working on it.
I think it would be interesting to see somehow, I don't know exactly what this would look like, but for like a furnace, I don't know, it has a useful life of 20 years, let's say. And if we could assume over the next 25 years, all the furnaces in this city are gonna be replaced, so what's the cost first of going to like a heat pump versus a furnace, a conventional furnace? And yeah, I mean, that would be like next level if we could see those upstream emission comparisons
Do you
too.
think like people's individual homes, all of the commercial buildings, all the public buildings, or are you just saying
Every-
buildings?
All of them. I mean, they're all gonna have to be replaced, right? In 25 years, presumably. All the furnaces, are gonna hit their end of life.
Yeah.
I will add, I'll just make a plug here, is we have done that for another client where we've done really basic cost benefit analysis. So, based off what they modeled, what would be the cost to the resident on doing the heat pump switch versus if they installed another gas furnace per se. That was not part of this project, but if that was something in the future you wanted to do, we are able to actually do some of those calculations.
And I actually might be able to wrap that into that Dr. Cog work in terms of the residential sector. And there is a way that I'm trying to figure it out for public buildings. Commercial buildings, there's kind of already a lot of research out there in the commercial sector, whereas there's a lot less in the residential sector. The public sector is just because buildings in different municipalities are so different. If you have historic buildings and all that, and we have a really special profile in a lot of different ways. A lot of historic buildings and stuff like that. So we could use that research for the commercial side to look at different ordinances for when new buildings come. It's really hard. You can then do the incentive side that LaDonna was talking about. How are you incentivizing to force a current existing building that does not get a new building owner that has the same ownership for 100 years? It's thinking about the policy pathways of it, it's you could incentivize it, but it's a little bit harder to mandate it unless they're building something new. Or if you have a program for residents, that's actually, I think, would be pretty successful. Or public buildings, pretty easy. But yeah, that commercial piece I still noodle on all the time.
If you knew that there was say a $2,000 on average gap between a conventional furnace and a heat pump, you're like, okay, well, if Littleton just covered that gap, maybe that would incentivize it. I mean, that could help drive our policy information,
Yeah,
our policy decisions.
that'd be really cool.
Yeah, that's to the point about incentives. I mean, our goal here is to make our recommendation to council on most moderately or least aggressive.
You can mix and match too, but yeah.
But, there's nothing behind this that says what drives getting it done.
Yeah.
I will say the incentive side is one thing that's a positive thing. It's more, it makes it more of a voluntary thing and, ease the cost, potentially replacement. There's a lot of things like that, but when you mandate it, I don't know if you're familiar with the Energize Denver code and all the lawsuits that are out there over that right now. And, maybe until things like that sort out and you see what the landscape is for litigation on building owners saying, I'm not, I can't take the burden of this. So, given that maybe the sticks won't work as well, but maybe the carrots will get us someplace there, I don't see us getting to this 100% column. If this is really about, let's make a recommendation,
That is what it is about. So if like that's what you think. The other option is y'all are advising council. So council be ultimately the ones that decide. They might say, thank you for the recommendation. We're gonna go as aggressive as we can. Like I don't really know. That's not up to me either. But it's kind of the same thing with the ways that we do it. So we would probably have different options to present to council of, okay, we could do a voluntary program, we could do incentive, we could do a really aggressive one that docks people and stuff. But again, those are like the minutia that I would research and maybe present to y'all and I would advise on, but ultimately your elected officials are the decision makers for stuff like that. So like, yes, it's all important to talk about and figure out. We have someone in the room that is an elected official, which is awesome, but like it's figuring out how to, package the way that y'all want to advise council so that they can advise me on how I can come up with the programs or incentives. So
That's a good question too. Thank you for this.
yeah.
Sarah, I'm Amanda. I'm on council here. Are there sample policies or ways that are provided of how to achieve these? And I understand that this group is making a recommendation of just, which path to follow. And, I'm only in my second month. And we have already faced a situation where we are trying to address a code change that is related to a goal that was set around the tree canopy. But then we're asking, okay, but where's the water for this? Who's fronting the cost? Who's maintaining these trees? Where is the burden? And is this sound policy in a climate that is warming and we have a drought? And so we're asking those questions, but this goal was set a couple of years ago and it might have been a shoot for the moon kind of goal, but we are looking at an actual policy that would enforce a requirement on housing that's being built to have 30% of their property be tree canopy, which is a lot when you're talking about, especially an infill or multifamily, something like that. So as someone who's making those decisions, just to tell you, that's the kinds of things that we're facing as we decide on ordinances or codes or policies that achieve these. So yeah, I'm just curious, what kinds of things are going to help us be successful?
That'll be more so up to the municipality rather than Sarah can speak to her experience too, because she's also worked for local government for many years before her job at Egley and has a ton of expertise in this sector. But in terms of this is just very much the data, but that's what I'm hoping that the larger resilience and adaptation plan that all of these other plans will go into will do. So we've established goals, we have a baseline, we've done the climate risk and vulnerability assessment to understand our hazards and work with the community to identify those understandings. So what are we going to do from there? What are our actual actions? How are we going to advise people that want to be involved to adapt? What programs are going to come from that? And so I think all of that during that next part of the process would be, we would bring all of those different pathways and options to council, and I would likely use resources like the network through Egley and other member organizations that we're a part of to hear what their best practices are, what's working well, because we're not the first to do this, so we can learn from the Boulders and the Fort Collins and being like, yeah, we set a 2030 net zero or whatever waste goal in 2000, and here we are. It's really hard. Here's why this didn't work. So there's that where I can do all of that different types of research, and then we can have someone also like Sarah, but in terms of the in terms of this specific plan and model, we're more general now, knowing that this would be an overall target. and then crafting realistic ways to get there and getting into each of those programs.
Well, I'll say that the way I'm kind of thinking about it is that, y'all would tell us what policy you want to adopt, and then staff would come back with how we would achieve that goal, right? Because we're not gonna be able to solve the actual, the programming here, right? We can just solve whatever percentage or whatever policy we want in the future. So it'd be up to staff to come back to council and say, this is what you asked for. This is how we think we can achieve it.
So there's like a cool program in Denver where they're like incentivizing heat pumps by going to the lowest income to figure out if you're qualified to get a certain amount of a rebate, so then you can get long-term energy savings. And they figure that out through this climate protection fund that the city passed, where voters passed a sales tax to go towards doing incentive programs like that. And that's anyone that spends money in the city and county of Denver. So like there are other neighboring cities that have done things like that. They've also done other things, as LaDonna pointed out, that are going through litigation. So we can learn from our neighbors, but I think some of those programs have been wildly popular, like their e-bikes and transitioning people from, walking or single-use occupancy vehicles to biking. Do like an e-bike, those have been super popular, and it's really straightforward. You get an e-bike. So it's interesting, and I think we can use those as different examples and learning opportunities.
Yeah. And I'll just add too, because Laura said, yeah, we're a resource for the entire city. So the ICLEI USA membership is a city whole membership. So every staff member technically can use us as a resource. Now, we usually strongly encourage one point of contact us trying to contact us and not like 100 different staff members. But we have, a network of close to 350, 360 members nationwide that we can reach out to get best practices. We are developing a knowledge hub that will launch later this year that you would be able to go on as a staff member to identify what policies are out there, what programs have been implemented. We are always writing case studies on municipalities that we are seeing successes, so that all those resources become available as an ICLEI member to you. But then, yeah, we're always willing, we do technical assistance hours for our members in which we could do desk research. So if, as this is going on, because like these are the big picture, like this is the target that we want to try to hit, what do we all have to implement? Laura could reach out to us and say, hey, we're looking at wanting to do a energy efficiency policy for multifamily homes in our jurisdiction. Could you devote like 2 hours of your time to seeing who has policies out there that you could send my way? So she wouldn't have to do that legwork. We would do it for her. So there are some benefits of the membership beyond this project.
So I want to go back to what we're being asked to recommend as a board, which is kind of these, how aggressive do we want to be in these goals? And for me, it's more about what are we trying to signal? So like, do we want to set the stretch goal where we're signaling, we want to have all these innovation and creative problem solving and really like push ourselves even with the thought that we're not going to get there? Or do we want to set that more realistic goal that feels more attainable? And so that to me, like, I feel like we might, like all these questions that are being asked are super important, but going back to like what we as a board are being asked, I want to kind of bring us back to that because I think that's an important thing that we need to answer. And there's so many questions that like Laura's going to have to go down so many rabbit holes later to answer. But as a board, what we can answer today is looking at more like, what are we trying to signal to our community? Are we trying to signal that we want to be 100%, reduced, like, from where we are now by 2050 and just be super aggressive with it? Is that where we think our community wants us to,
we don't want to
communicate
scare them and anger them.
Yeah, or is that too aggressive and we're gonna have people come out and be like, well, that's crazy, and have more realistic numbers that feel more attainable? So just to try and like bring it back to the question that we're actually being asked to answer as well.
So I need to understand this table better because I understand most aggressive, all 100%, but moderately aggressive, I don't understand how you chose 80% for some 70% for others, and same thing with least aggressive. Is that the most cost
This is-
effective? Like for least aggressive, did you choose each of those components? So that's the most cost effective way to get a 69% reduction?
So what these are is we'd be modeling the percentage of square feet shifted. So for example, for heat pumps, it'd be 60% of your square footage would be shifted instead of 100%. And these numbers are pulled off of best practices. So, looking at best practices, moderately aggressive means that they are achievable with, backing. To me, it's almost more of a realistic aggressive target as compared to the most aggressive, because 100%, I mean, that, in all honesty, it's almost impossible to get. But someone to just model to see what would that actually get us if we could get to 100%. So that's also taking into account, energy loss, all that kind of stuff. That gets you that moderately aggressive. The least aggressive is basically based off what you see the market doing.
Sarah, so you
Mhm.
chose 80% for residential heat pumps
Mhm.
because that can be achieved, or that's most cost effective thing to do for moderately aggressive?
It would be something that would be achievable with effort, is how I would say. There would still have to be effort put behind it. Wouldn't just happen on its own, but it's a more realistic, achievable target than, say, your aggressive target. Your least aggressive is just based off market, what the market trends are kind of going. So really, you're not doing anything. You're really putting all your money behind the fact that the market itself is going to change and you won't have to actually invest anything.
Right. And then would you also explain to me in a little more detail about the non-controllables? Because no matter what we're doing, if I get this right, we're gonna not hit 20% of it, right? Because there's these uncontrollables. And will you explain what some of those uncontrollables are?
So some of the stuff you have in your inventory, I'm pretty sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, you have airport fuel, correct?
No.
Oh, you don't have airport. I might have to pull it up real quick to see if you have your inventory. But there's some things that you're reporting in your inventory that is beyond the control of the city to actually try to implement, to bring the cost reduction down.
Would you give me for example of that? So
Well, isn't the fugitive emissions? Is that?
Yeah, I think it's diffusion emissions, and I'm trying to think of what else you have. I need to see if I can.
The wastewater treatment plant too.
It may be. Let me see if I can pull it up. Then there are some things, like we're not addressing all of the transportation emissions that are actually in your inventory because we're modeling based off of already established targets. So let's see here. Let me see.
If we were able to adjust all of them differently, but it's because we're using what's already been adopted by council in prior plans for transportation
I see.
and for tree canopy. The
Yeah, some of
And our cars can just drive down Santa Fe, are they included?
Pass through traffic.
That's true. Traffic.
Oh, yes, I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things, I just pulled it up. So we have rail in your inventory.
Some of that would be like thinking about the regional RTD. Are they gonna have?
Regional buses.
Yeah, there's some stuff that's outside of like our direct control, but could be done through coalitions or the state level or several incentives that are not there right now, like.
So Sarah, I do have a question. So is the least aggressive, are you basically saying that's like a do nothing option for us?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's a Because do nothing, like meaning nothing is happening, yes, you'll see a increase, but this is if you're just, you know, I'm trying to think of how to describe it. You're barely doing anything. You're not putting any policies in place. You're not providing any programs for individuals. It is just the natural occurrence of things happening. So a resident chooses to do a heat pump instead of having an incentive to get them to have a heat pump. So actions are still happening. You're just not driving any of those actions.
The local government has absolutely nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
We're riding the coattails of like Colorado, like state.
Like Colorado's doing something and we're benefiting.
Well, there are scenarios, right, where we do nothing and our emissions increase. That's a population gain over time.
That means nothing is changing. We're just basing it off your emissions and saying, you know, just based off your population growth, this is what your emissions are projected to be. Now, that doesn't mean that that's what your emissions are going to be, because people are going to be organically doing energy efficiency actions. But we have to forecast something as we just base it off of your population growth estimates.
So I'm happy to go first on the question of recommendations. I think I'm pretty agnostic. And there are two reasons for that. One is, and I think it's two pretty critical pieces of information that at least I would be missing from my decision making. One is the question I asked earlier about capital requirements for meeting the different least moderately and most aggressive benchmarks. The second is, it's just a fact of local government in a community our size and with our budget that anytime we take a large new set of policy goals, we are almost inevitably displacing some other set of policy goals. It's a game of whack-a-mole, right? We have, at least when I was on council, 85 million, I think, was the city budget. And all of that and then some is already earmarked by the time you get to it. So much of that money goes to payroll, for example. So when we talk about incentives, we can't meaningfully compare ourselves to multi-billion-dollar jurisdictions like Denver. Littleton is in zero position to offer hundreds and thousands of dollars to each individual resident for e-bikes and for heat pumps and so on, without some massive windfall of federal or private money. I think it's also just kind of the case that in that game of whack-a-mole, there's going to be some stuff that this group cares about, right? Like some of the existing goals of the council that would be affected by this are the community's desire to build more affordable housing. Because at least for right now, housing that includes all this stuff is more expensive than housing that does not include all of this stuff. And the same thing with safer streets. Right, money it costs a lot of money to build safer streets or more affordable housing. And so, you know, without us having some kind of dialogue with council, I just don't think I can, with any kind of meaning behind it, take a benchmark. I think Hannah's point is well taken. What do we want to signal? I mean, 110% is what we want to signal. Everyone wants a carbon neutral future with, you know, these beautiful gleaming buildings with insulation and heat pumps and solar panels and so on. And I think it is important for us to signal, but I think we are an advisory board to council, and if we're going to do signaling, it has to be thoughtful signaling that answers, at least for me, some of these questions that right now are not answered. That's fine.
So if you don't provide a recommendation, I will present this presentation and let council make a decision without any ESB input.
Or we could just wait longer.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did
Do we want to vote
the
or?
board want us to explore the economic piece of this before we took it to council?
Well, I think, I mean, I've made this point before, that, you know, our ability to work effectively as a board depends in large measure on our credibility of our work product and on our work product being sort of plug and play, right? We have to answer all the hard questions for council, and then present our recommendations to council. I think if we go to council and say, we want 100%. No, we did not consider the.
We all probably just write a
capital-
letter.
Capital requirements, or, you know, how this might displace existing policy priorities. They're not doing it themselves.
I think we can make a recommendation and acknowledge that, yeah, what we're asking you for is gonna be tough, and we get that. This is what we'd love to have happen, and council then try to figure it out, do the best you can, right? Without freaking out.
I mean, we're not gonna have
So.
we're not gonna have all the answers. Like,
Right.
there are so many variables. We could do
That's
all
why
of
we
the
have
modeling
council
for
and
this money, and there could be a 50% tariff on everything that we have from China. And we just have to sort of keep figuring out what these pieces look like and what those changes mean. And so even though we have some goals set, and we're driving towards something, it's the ability to also adapt and understand how these different changes then impact things like this. And so if we reach 2050 and they're like, well, we didn't reach our goal, here's why, but here's what we did to try to get there. We made the best decision at the time possible with the information we had then. We did everything we could with the things that were at our disposal. I think it's, you know, we're just not gonna have all the answers when it comes to this space, and sometimes that's uncomfortable. But I think it's more, if y'all had a way to advise council what you think makes the most sense for the community, would probably be helpful for us to walk away with, so that when we go to council, we can say, well, ESB, after thinking about it, feels this way. I mean, we can sit on it and revisit in March as well, before we bring it in April. That could also be an
So,
option.
yeah, I was gonna ask Sarah, so you had mentioned that some communities do just like a basic cost comparison between heat pump and a furnace. How long would that take to do for us?
I mean, that one is it's currently not in this project scope, so we would have to look to see what that is.
I
But
realize.
it took roughly, for the communities that we've done, it's probably, with how many that we modeled, you know, I mean, ballpark estimate, probably 20 hours of work. Now, I will say it's very, very like back of the envelope calculations that we're doing, because our platform, that's a much bigger calculation that it's doing. But a quick, you know, like this would be a low cost, you know, effort versus this is a higher cost effort. We don't like to associate official dollars when we're doing the back of the envelope calculation, just because, you know, we're using estimations on like, this is the estimated cost of what a heat pump would cost versus an estimated cost of a furnace and the maintenance that's going to be required and the annual fuel cost that's going to be required over the lifespan of said equipment. What's the difference between those? So it's like, okay, well, that one, you know, maybe there's over the course of 25 years, it might be $1,000 difference between the two. So there is a savings over the course of 25 years, but it's a small savings for a resident versus something else that could be a bigger savings. So we could do something like that. I could not say timeline on what it is, because we do, you know, we'd have to see on our own side of schedule, you know, when could we work this in? So based off the timing that this plan, that Laura wants to do, if it worked, we would just have to add it to the scope and adjust the contract.
Could you qualitatively perhaps say how much more expensive trying to obtain the most aggressive strategy is compared to the moderately aggressive strategy?
So just a simple, if you were trying to do most aggressive, this is the cost. But the struggle is too with this is the cost to whom? would be the question. The cost to the municipality to implement programs, or is it the cost to the resident or the business that has to actually install? Because there's nothing established, there are no programs, there are no incentives. It's really hard to estimate the cost difference between.
Oh, sorry, Sarah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it would be really hard to estimate if you're looking at how much would it cost Littleton if it was most aggressive versus least aggressive. That's hard to say because you would be choosing what programs and incentives that you would be doing.
Another real, I mean, if we're really grappling with the complexity of this, which if we're serious about this as a policy initiative, if we want council to be serious about this as a policy initiative, we're gonna have to do is time value of money calculations, because almost some of this capital investment is gonna be based on finance arrangements. And
yeah, absolutely. And I'd say in my past life, so I wrote the master plan for my previous jurisdiction that we had. And the plan is, I would say, the targets that you're wanting to try to achieve. The cost benefits that you're talking about, I did those on the individual programs that I wanted to launch and the projects I wanted to launch. So, for example, shifting to EV vehicles. Did not do a cost on the overall cost that was going to be, because there's too many variables going into what that cost would be. But when it's like, okay, first program we want to do is install EV charging stations. What would be the cost if we did 100 versus, and so we did the cost benefit on that to narrow down, what actually was going to be feasible for our jurisdiction to do. Just like if you're switching, saying you're like, okay, well, what if we want to do 50 EV vehicles for fleet every year? What's the cost of that versus, maintaining what they currently have? And that whole plan, you would do a cost just off that one. So that's how I did it at my jurisdiction. The plan itself was just a guiding document of saying, for my office, going, okay, we have this plan that says we want to have, our plan actually was 100% EVs by 2035. And I will say we did not get to that. That was my driving force. So it's what programs, plans, and actions could we implement to do this? Now, where do I find the capital to actually try to do all these programs? And what we didn't have capital for didn't happen. And it was put to the side.
I have an idea. In our action plan that was very well created before I was on this board, there's like the little meters, right? There's the impact and cost. Could we not apply that here? And then where there's a high impact, lower cost, we say, let's go full bore, 100% on that. And then maybe we're a little less ambitious with the ones that are a higher cost. And then at least we're recognizing like, yeah, this is more of a burden. We still want to do some of that. But let's take the lower hanging fruit and go all the way with those. Is that an option? I mean, take a little more analysis, but maybe not too much.
Laura, what's your timeline on looking to get this in front of council?
I am going in front of council April 14th. I mean, I can change it. There are a bunch of other items I'm bringing to council, so I see it getting pushed pretty far if I don't stick with that date, just due to scheduling alone and summer break and all of the things. But I mean, I'm happy to do whatever y'all think is best, and we can delay it and work with ICLEI and figure it out.
If it doesn't go in April, it probably doesn't go.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to delay it.
Yeah.
So that's my biggest concern with like doing further analysis is like, if it pushes it 10 months or something, then like, that's, defeats. Yeah. So I like, it's one of those things where I always want more data, but at the same time, like, in my opinion, what I think, like, my recommendation is go with moderately aggressive based on what we've seen the community react to with, on past things. I think 100% is too aggressive. Yes, we don't have the financial analysis to understand the implications of that yet, but at the same time, we have to set something or it's gonna be nothing for another year.
I think you might have agreement.
Yeah, I mean, if they say, hear this presentation and agree that we can do more than nothing, but you know, less than, you know, the unrealistic 100% across the board. I think that then gets to, of this pie, if they agree of this, you know, of this particular set of goals, you know,
Where we focus our efforts.
can we get some costs behind this? Or sources of funds or things like that to where you can then start to say, this is a more near-term priority, this one, we're gonna have to either go to the voters or do something that, you know, it's not a just pull the lever across the board. But to make a recommendation, I think we can do that without, we have to know what they wanna do, you know, and then we can get more help from Sarah or prioritize or do some things like that based on, there's today, then there's 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you know.
Back to Andrew's low hanging fruit, though, I was thinking like energy efficient streetlights, that doesn't seem that hard. Could we leave that at 100? You know what I mean? Like, are there some on there that we could bump up a little bit past moderately?
Well, I think,
You know what I mean?
I think you would wanna pick from one of the 3 columns, but you could mix and match is sort of what, so if you were like, yeah, we could do 100% energy efficient lighting, but you're like,
But everything else
You're
go
like-
with moderate.
maybe you could go with moderate, maybe one of them, you're like, this should be least aggressive, and that will change, and basically what we know is it will fall likely somewhere between 69 to 79% reductions, depending on how those levers change.
Well, that would be my recommendation, moderately, except for streetlights, go aggressive, go the most. Just so we have 100% in there, and that seems to be the most.
I mean, if you're already doing the street.
Accessible.
That's actually something Sarah and I talked about, we're like, literally, if you're already in there, you may as
Do it.
well just finish filling up.
Yeah, and it goes back to.
I don't know if those 5% really are doing there, but for the other ones, yeah, I mean.
Yeah.
It's whatever y'all think, and I think you can also, if we wanna craft something for a letter to council saying, this is based on what we know, this is what we recommend, with some of the caveats y'all have mentioned, that when we start doing the programs, we wanna see cost benefit analysis, we wanna understand this more and see these things over time, because I think all of the points are well made. It's just, I wish there's more certainty in it, but we gotta start somewhere.
I'm just asking, is there any concern, maybe at the staff level, maybe at the council level, maybe among the board, that, you know, picking a threshold here, to the extent it involves a bunch of individual projects, is just displacing our existing and much more thought through action plan. The council's gonna say, okay, we gotta do energy efficient streetlights, let's go do energy efficient streetlights. And now we're not doing all of the stuff in the.
Well, that's in your
in the
plan,
action plan.
not to get technical, that one is in your plan, but.
Yeah.
No.
So, yeah,
We
with
can't-
streetlights, I think that is achievable, though. We've already done a plan, or we've looked at streetlights already. It would probably involve the city actually buying the streetlights from Excel.
We can also request.
Bad example, then, just pick a different.
You picked the one that I was like, wait a second. And there's also a way, yeah, that would make it safer, if you had streetlights that pointed down and then light pollution, anyhow, I can.
You know, I won't be on the board after whatever it is, April, so you all do obviously what you feel. I just have a kind of a reluctance general in this meeting and previous meetings to just, we seem to want to take ourselves off task, right? We created an action plan, and part of what we should do with council is say, okay, now it's time for the next thing on the action plan. Here's a budgetary analysis, not ready, set, go. Like, we're doing that advisory work. I just think for me, and then I'll stop making the point, there's just an untenable arbitrariness to doing this now and just sort of picking a threshold and asking council to go do something. I'm not even sure what the it is. And I do have concerns about what does that mean for our existing action plan, and I do have concerns too that
Well, I think we should just vote then on what we want to recommend.
Yeah, it's 10-10 for Sarah, so maybe if we don't have any other questions, we could let her, just.
I didn't see her yawn.
She's done a great job, but
My
if we don't have any more questions for Sarah, maybe we could excuse her, have the rest of her evening.
Yes, thank you, Sarah.
Yes, no problem. And I will follow up with you, Laura, later on next week, with the outcomes and next steps. So it was great meeting you all. Hope you have a wonderful night.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
I can share the same presentation too, if we want to take another look. Or if y'all want to take a vote in March, I'm also, if you want to sit on it, I sent all of the information and elements because they're also broken down in that Excel sheet. And then Colleen's putting all of that information as well, I believe, on the packet online for the public. So I mean, there's, if we want to wait until March and y'all want to think about it a little more, that's okay. I would probably want a decision from y'all March so that I could continue with it in April, if possible. But if not, we can delay it.
Chair, you're asking just for a straw poll.
Yeah, I mean,
I have a question for Scott first. Okay, so
Question for
why,
who?
why do you say
For
this
you.
is arbitrary? I think it's one of our priorities. I don't have it memorized.
No, I'm saying picking one of the thresholds without having some of, at least to me, some of those essential questions answered. It's just kind of like, I don't think it gives meaningful guidance to council. I think we're gonna.
So you feel like it's our role to answer those questions before we give it to council? Because I'm feeling like that's council's role to answer those questions. This is what we want. You all figure it out.
I mean,
Make
I
it
think
happen.
we're advisory
And
to
staff.
council, right?
Yeah.
So if we want to
Sorry.
be corrected, if we want to be credible, we
a
bring
big job.
them. Here's our recommendation and here's why we want to adopt it.
So I guess
not
I would-
Here's our sort of wishful thinking.
Do we need to do that?
I don't, I mean, my position's pretty clear, don't.
Yeah,
We do.
but I get, yeah, I would,
As a group and it's.
I'm not sure council would necessarily agree with that, would they? I mean, would they really want that much detail from us, or do they?
I don't know, I'm a newbie, but, I mean, I think that we're gonna do that work as well anyway, so, and ask those questions. And ask the questions of, okay, how do you get there? But those will be questions of staff, I think, and that's part of the relationship is the staff saying, okay, this is what it would take to get there, and then us saying yes or no, or okay, do this, do that.
Or even coming back to us for more feedback and input and ideas.
This time, here's the incentive program, here are the pros and cons, here's how we fund it. What are your recommendations?
Yeah.
Where are the gaps? Because yeah, if we spend all of this time at this high level, I worry we're never gonna get into the nitty gritty.
That's why we need to just do it.
And I think part of this is also backing up the work that Laura's done on the greenhouse gas inventory and the work that Eckley's, spent on this as well, and us saying, yeah, this has been, there is more to do, but here's this work that's been done that we support and wanna kind of lift up. So.
Yeah, I can let y'all make that decision. It's not up to me. So whatever you think is the way you want to advise council, I'm happy to support and adjust as we need.
Okay, well, I vote for moderate except for streetlights, 100%.
No
That's my vote.
motions or any seconds or anything that you just go.
Like, you could just tell me tell
Well,
everyone.
I wanna, I guess I'll make the motion, okay? Motion that we do the moderately aggressive, but go at 100% for the streetlights. That's my.
Well done, Tom. Does anybody have any major problems with that? Or can we all live with it for now? I mean, it's not like this is law. This is just what we want you to do. And we just need to do it. We need to tell you what we want, and then we need to let you figure it out.
I think I oddly would leave streetlights at 95%. Otherwise I agree.
Why 95?
I don't know.
I mean, all the streetlights in the next 20 years are gonna need to be replaced.
100's
Right?
a nice round number. Yeah, I don't know, maybe.
I think aren't they worse than furnaces? Because they're not energy efficient. They're gonna burn out sooner.
I don't know anything about.
whatever.
I feel like for me,
It's
high
not
impact,
law.
like it's fun to have something that's 100%, but to me, that's not it. But you could steamroll me on that, that's fine.
Again, it's not the law. We're just saying this would be great. Please try to make it happen. Are we okay? Can we live with that?
Wait, which one did y'all decide between the street lights?
Moderate, but 100% on the streetlights.
Ish.
That's the goal. That's not,
Split the difference.
nothing bad will happen to you if you don't.
I think Igley would cry at that point. You would have to do that difference in the math. I think I would have Sarah in tears, so let's not do that one.
I'll put out the motion then just to be moderate down the line. Let's keep streetlights at 95% if anyone wants to.
Of course, I can't second
LaDonna, do you care either way?
I was all on the moderate column. That was where I was, so I would second you.
I withdraw my motion.
Wow.
We could always say if we do that extra 5%, amazing. That's icing on the cake.
Yeah.
You can say that if you want to.
Pizza party.
Sure,
Sounds good.
So y'all wanna go?
sure. Just go moderate all the way,
All
but
the way.
better is better.
Well, that is best.
Part of the written recommendation, we can say we want streetlights at 100%, but our official recommendation is.
Is 95.
Whatever detail you would like to get into, I'm here to support you. So we only have about 13 minutes left. And I did wanna leave some time for you, so we can, I'll use 3 minutes, then give you the last 10 if that works.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So for that middle item on the South Suburban, the biggest thing is that there's been turnover at South Suburban, and we've also had some new staff come and go. And so next month, our manager of grounds, open space and natural resources, and our city forester are both gonna come, and they wanna introduce and say a little bit about their work, but they actually, in sort of a rare other presentation mode, wanna hear what y'all presented to council in March 2025. And I've given them that one pager that I resent to y'all too. This should also be on the website as well with this agenda, but just so that we can get the board members that weren't at that session up to speed on those recommendations, or if there were any questions or concerns. So I don't know if y'all want to review that a little bit on your own, or if you already did.
I've read it.
Okay.
My question was that document created with South Suburban? Okay, is it a recommendation for operating with South Suburban?
Yeah, it was a recommendation to council on when they revisit.
You want me to bring the document
this is
up?
what we'd like.
I mean, I looked at it, but I saw the South Suburban logo up there on it as well, so that.
Oh, that was just,
Yeah,
be nice.
that was just proven. We did not consult them,
Okay,
really. Or work with them, I should say.
Uh-huh.
They came and spoke, but we didn't. Let's just hear council, this is what we'd love for you to do.
I mean,
That's our role.
my other board, Andy Bass did come to that, and we were talking about a 1999 maintenance plan that needed to be updated with South Suburban and so forth. And what we said at that time was that, at least as it relates to the parks, that the maintenance plan is individually created for each park as part of the master plan. So, I thought that was interesting that there's no overall, document that kind of serves as the guideline.
Yeah, imagine there's no standard, essentially.
Well, it's a 3-page document.
Oh, I'm
60.
sorry, yeah, it is a 3-page document. 60.
Yes.
So
But one of those typewriters that corrected itself.
there is one, it like it has handwritten notes on the side. That's what's the law of the land at the moment. So these are recommendations we're going through the process of updating this operating agreement between our staff that have subject matter expertise to our grounds team and South Suburban's operating staff as well as their executive staff and our leadership to say, okay, it's 2026, what are we gonna do? And so ESB as like a long-term goal, even before I started, wanted to be sort of an oversight of that. So they recommended based on best practices during a study session last year, here's what we want to see in an ideal world. And so now there's sort of the opportunity to inform our subject matters, like, okay, here's what we were thinking, like, what do you think of this? Is this feasible? You're gonna be in the room. Can we, trust you to make this happen? And to what extent? And so it's kind of a review of that presentation to council when council was like, yeah, this looks great. We're still in the works, and their executive director quit, and here we are a year later.
Our relationship with South Suburban is a little more unique because we actually own most of the parks and they maintain them for us. And a lot of the other jurisdictions, South Suburban actually owns and maintains those parks. So our relationship's just a little bit different.
I don't know if any of y'all want to speak to it who've been part of it longer, if there's something I've left out.
Yeah, I think maybe I'm just missing some of the detail of how we got to this point, because I mean, we worked this up, and can't we just give it back to Mike Gent and just say, hey, like, in whatever negotiations are gonna be happening from this moment forward with South Suburban, like where we were previously, just take this document and try to.
Like you're saying, it's already created, what more do we need to do?
Yeah.
There's something we can do
Point to
here.
that.
I mean, they don't have to come. It's like if you wanna hear a little bit more about the work they're doing to drive this, and if there are like certain nuances and how this relates to the tree canopy that's maintained, or like some of the concerns that were brought up with this. And we want to sort of close that circle and say you've talked to the subject matters in the room, not just the leaders in the room, like the people that actually have the expertise in forestry and in managing this like policy overall. It's like an opportunity for that, but they also, I'm sure, would be totally fine to skip March meeting at 6:30 p.m. They're booked if we want this opportunity to close this loop.
Yeah, I think in my mind, it'd be interesting, but kind of to Scott's point, like what would that change? We've already made our recommendation. Would that change our recommendation, or is it literally just kind of informational, and then we'd be like, okay, cool, thanks, good to know, which is, again, good to know. It is good to know. I'm not saying it's not good to know, but if we're looking at actually pursuing, our next advisory item, is this the most valuable use of
We
time?
could craft the recommendation y'all just voted on instead, and y'all could write it during, like, they don't have to come.
They being South Suburban.
They being our manager of grounds, I can't even remember her name. It's grounds, natural resources. We don't have time for the whole title, but then the city forester. She manages all the land and the natural resources.
It might be good for them to come just to update you on what they're doing.
I think that'd be cool, like a
They can
20-minute update on, hey, here's where the status of the operating agreement. I think that'd be interesting, but I would, in my opinion, it wouldn't behoove us to spend an hour and a half, going through all of it if we've already
I
created.
think it'd be 30 minutes with them. It'd just be getting to know them and putting a face to the name of the people that are gonna advocate for the things you care about. They care about the same things that we all care about in this room, so that's kind of exciting to have that alignment. And maybe I send this to them and they review it, and they just, if y'all wanna review it too, they could just ask if they have any clarifying questions.
I think it'd be more interesting to have the negotiators come. Now, hey, come tell us what you're doing with tree canopy stuff. Because we have a forestry master plan we can all just go look at, right? But why on earth did we do this like months and months ago? It's essentially being bounced back to us unchanged, unimplemented all these months later. Like, was it really just there was some turnover in South Suburban that caused this whole project of negotiating with them to just like fizzle into nothing? Because we were asked to spend meaningful time on this.
The short
That's
answer.
completely frustrating.
Yes.
They have their new director now.
Yeah.
The change is that the director is there
So
now.
I don't. That's.
So yes, that was the problem. And now that there is somebody, we're good to go. Right?
Start negotiating.
Yes.
Jen is gonna be leading that. negotiation, is my understanding. So we could have him come talk to the group about that.
I mean, it's just, in the negotiation. Then Mike's gonna want to do that. He's probably frustrated too.
Yeah.
I don't, again, I'm sort of a lame duck here, but I don't. This board's time to just kind of revisit this type of stuff. I think, Lord, you could tell them a quick update, or the chair could talk with Mike and just be like, hey, look,
Honestly, Diana and Mary will be thrilled.
Yeah.
Have their evening back.
My messaging for the board is like, let's do this thing. How can we help you?
Yeah.
Let's go.
Now that they have their director.
Yeah, I could also have it as, maybe if I have them review it on their own time and they send me questions, I could quickly in the first 10 minutes be like, they had these clarifying questions, let's get it on the recording and we can play it back to them and make sure that they're understanding they can watch the council meeting that y'all presented and make sure they're in alignment and understanding it. And maybe that's it, that's fine. That's fine by me. I just wanted to make sure we were closing that loop. Just because there's been so much turnover, but.
I mean, I feel like if they're only gonna do 20 to 30 minutes, it's not the end of the world to spend that time and make them feel like, yeah, we support you.
It's really up to y'all.
We have comms coming next time too.
Comms is coming next time.
How long do you think that? Communications department because that's a huge part of the greenhouse stuff as well
We
as
could also shift
communication.
council update and just have the very quick update from Mary and Diana through me, and we don't have to have them come, and we could have your update next time, and then we can have the communications team come,
I think
if that's better.
Well, and we can work with the chair on setting the agenda for next month.
Yeah, and if y'all have input, you can, as always, email Gretel or myself and let us know how you want the agenda to look or what items you want to add, or if you don't think something's necessary that we've talked about. Okay. I haven't ever received that email, but definitely can do it.
it's always the first time. So.
Okay. Well, I feel bad. Now you have 3 minutes. So I feel like that's really, I'm sorry, that's so cruel.
No worries at all.
Do you want to do it next time or just give it?
Next time is fine. I mean, the gist is I just wanted to talk about the role of the boards and commissions and what I'm learning and how to support you all to be most effective and thinking about, okay, these are the goals that have been laid out. And what is the role of the board as a connector between the community and your expertise that you're bringing and the council and the policies that we're making, especially noting that environmental stewardship is such a unique board because environmental guidelines are embedded in all of the other things that we're doing and so many lanes. You know, it's not like your arts and culture or transportation where you have kind of a real clear directive. And so just thinking together about how it's structured to be most effective for you all and how I can support with that process. So that's the teaser. We'll talk more about that next week. And I'd like to meet individually. I've set up with Gretel and there will be a couple new folks joining this board in April. We've got actually, I think that this was the board that had the most people mark it as their first choice. So that's it's a sought after board. So I haven't gotten to really look through the candidates yet, but I'm hopeful that will help as well as we go into this next year, just really focused and effective and how can I best support that.
Look forward to it.
It's just about 8:30. A few seconds. So, yeah, we have a meeting on President's Day, but we'll tell you all about that at the next meeting.
Yes. This is more than likely my last meeting. My due date's 2 days after our meeting next month.
You can
so
hold out.
There's a chance. Very unlikely, but there's a chance. And then I did not reapply. So this is again, more than likely my last meeting. I know. Sad, bittersweet.
Come see you at the brewery.
Yeah, I'll be in the brewery.
For a while.
Yeah, I won't be at the brewery for a while, but
Yes.
eventually I'll be back.
Yeah, thank you for your work.
Yeah, well, thanks you for everything. I'm not alone.
All right. All right.